England's decision to ban the boiling of live lobsters is something that Atlantic Canada is watching closely. Lobster boils are a popular tradition there, stemming from a booming industry that generates nearly $3 billion every year. So, could or should Canada implement a similar ban? And how would the seafood industry be affected if we did? Joining us this morning is Shelley Adamo. She's a professor of psychology at Dalhousie University. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think this story is going to be new to people, maybe not in Atlantic Canada, but certainly in the rest of the country. I guess I want to start with, where do you stand on whether or not Canada should impose a ban on boiling live lobsters?
Well, first I want to say, of course, we should be kind to animals, and animal welfare is a serious issue. I have concerns because I really don't think lobsters have the capacity for feeling pain, certainly not the way we do. So we have to be careful about putting in something that sounds good, but might have minimal benefit for lobsters and could really hurt people who we know can suffer. And certainly our lobster fishers here in Nova Scotia, they're under a lot of pressure right now as it is, and they definitely can suffer.
One of the arguments made in the UK case is the other options as opposed to live boiling. So we know that you can grill lobster, poach it, bake it, and more. What's the argument for why not simply switching to a less controversial option?
Well, you could. Actually, interestingly enough, a paper that was published a few years ago showed that one of the kindest things you can do, and this sounds like an urban myth, but apparently it's true, you can put them in a lobster pot and just slowly increase temperature, like about a degree every minute or so. And in about 30 minutes, the brain stops functioning. So there are, excuse me, other ways you can do this, but you know, stunning has become the way that the European Union would like people to kill lobsters.
At the crux of this argument, at least across the Atlantic, is that there's no scientific consensus on whether or not lobsters feel pain.
Why? There's definitely no consensus.
Right. Why is it so difficult to determine?
You can't ask them. So that's the basic part. So you can't ask them. So you have to come up with other indirect tests and see what you can do. And the difficulty with this is that we know that robots and you can program machines to mimic human pain behavior. So just having the behavior itself doesn't necessarily mean that the organism or the entity is feeling pain. So pain is more than just being able to react to damage. It's that horrible emotional response. And that's the suffering part that we want to get away with, or we not want to produce in our lobsters. The problem is we don't know whether they actually have the capacity for that kind of emotional response. Mm-hmm. And the reason this is so unknown is we don't know a great deal about lobster brains, except that they're really small. And so the question is, how much neural brain cells, how many brain cells do you need to actually have that kind of capacity? And that's a really tough question to answer, and we don't know the answer. I tend to lean more that robots are just, or I should say lobsters are really just sophisticated robots, not, 10 or 8-legged humans. So I think that it's more likely that they don't have an inner experience of suffering, certainly not like we do. And the problem, though, to be very clear here, is that no one has a firm answer.
Okay, but they have some firm decisions. We know in the UK, we mentioned there's a ban. The bans are also now in Switzerland, Norway, and New Zealand. So let's talk about Canada. We hold, as we said, more than, it's almost a $3 billion industry here in this country. We hold more than half of the world's supply in hard-shelled Atlantic lobsters. Lobster boils are common along the East Coast, both, in a family setting and also professional settings. So what could a change like this mean for the lobster industry here in Canada?
Well, it's concerning because right now, many lobsters, or the lobster fishery has issues trying to get its product to places like China, where there are now additional tariffs. There are trade issues with the United States. So they're having to rely more on the domestic market. And we also know that our restaurant owners who like to produce or make lobsters for us when we go out to dinner, they're also struggling. So many restaurants are having a really difficult time. To do the stunning, the way that the EU would prefer people prepare lobster, the equipment costs about $7,000. And so my concern is that for something that it's not clear there's any benefit at all, because we're not sure what lobsters may or may not feel, could be a huge burden on many restaurants. So they may just decide not to bother to serve lobster if they have to buy this additional piece of equipment. And with a decline in domestic demand, that is really going to push down prices for lobster. And as I said, our lobster fishers are already under stress. And it's hard, especially in Nova Scotia. There are many rural communities that really require that lobster fishery for their existence. And so again, it's all very well. If there were no costs, we would like to say, well, even if there's only a small chance that lobsters may have some sense of something. I should also just underline the fact that whatever they have, it's not like what we have.
Right.
We have massive brains. We devote a lot of brain space to have emotional responses, and there's none of that in lobsters. So we're going to potentially cause harm to these communities, and it's not even clear that the lobsters will benefit by this. So that's my concern.
Shelley Adamo, professor of psychology at Dalhousie University. You study stress and responses in animals. Great to have your perspective on this as Atlantic Canada is watching to see what's happening in Europe with this ban. Thanks so much.
Thank you.